I've got about 2,300 miles, 2,400 miles on my new KTM 1190 Adventure, and I think I've got a pretty good feel for it. So it's time to do a little review. I'll probably do this in several chunks and edit it all together at the end, but you know, it's a great bike and I want to talk about it. I'll do a quick overview of what we're working with here. KTM is an Austrian company, best known for their dirt bikes and their you know, Dakar rally wins, things like that. But they've started making street bikes recently, and frankly, they've started making some damn good street bikes recently. Current lineup's got the 1190 Adventure, the new 1290 Super Adventure, you got the 1290 Super Duke, and then they've got a bunch of smaller bikes, Enduros and smaller Dukes, and they've got the RC8 Superbike. Pretty much the hallmark of the KTMs, especially the twins, are just this luscious LC8 motor. It's a liquid-cooled overhead cam V-twin, and man, is it sweet. Smooth, revs fast, puts out good torque, good power. Just a great motor. Sorry about that, little CHP interaction. So yeah, the heart of the bikes is the motor, but they've really become known for their electronics lately as well. I mean, this bike's just loaded to the gills with bells and whistles. Most of it for safety, more so than performance. Obviously it's got ABS brakes, but it's got lean angle sensing ABS brakes, which is a first in the industry. KTM calls it uncrashable. I'm not going to test that theory. But the brakes, you know, it allows you to basically be a ham-fisted idiot in turns and still come out okay. You know, instead of locking up the tire and washing out, or like more normal ABS, slowing the bike down and standing it up and running wide, the lean angle ABS allows the bike to make it around the curves just fine without running wide, without washing out, scrub speed. It's a very, very cool feature that I hope I never end up using. The bike's got traction control and throttle by wire, which work well together. And they also use the lean angle sensor. It used to be that traction control systems worked by cutting ignition or cutting fuel or both. This bike with the throttle by wire, it's got a servo on each of the throttle bodies, and when a traction control decides that there's too much power, it just moves the throttle bodies closed a little bit and reduces the power. It's a very, very smooth system. I see the light come on all the time, but I never really feel the intervention of the traction control, which is nice. It's a very, very well thought out, well built system. So you got the ABS, you got the traction control, you got the throttle by wire, you got the lean sensor. It's got ride modes and electronic or electrically adjustable damping and preload. It doesn't have dynamic damping. It just has adjustable damping, so you can adjust your compression 3 different modes. But all in all, it's a great package. Works really, really well. The suspension is great. I will say that the the electrically adjustable dampers, they don't do much. I mean, there's the difference between sport and comfort, as far as I can tell, is just a little compression damping. You know, even getting on the freeway, I never even bother putting it on comfort anymore because the difference is so slight. And I find it actually, if I start getting aggressive that having it in comfort mode does make the bike harder to ride well, because you end up with more dive on braking and more squat on acceleration. So I've basically left the dampers in the sport mode. For the ride mode, there's two that you use on regular street riding. It's got a rain mode and it's got an off-road mode. I haven't used either of those and don't plan to anytime soon. But the street and the sport mode are the ones you'll use most often. Street works really well. It's got very smooth throttle delivery, which is the one I use the most often. But the traction control intervenes a lot earlier in the street mode as well. The sport mode, the traction control lets you get a little crazier. It'll let you drift the back end a little bit, get a little bit of wheelie action going. You can have a little more fun with it. But I find that the throttle is really twitchy in sport mode. I live on a really bumpy road. My driveway is half mile long and really, really bumpy. And I find if I go down it in sport mode, the bumps are constantly exacerbating themselves because there's throttle inputs left and right. You go over a bump and it opens more throttle and that makes the bump worse. Or go into a dip and that closes the throttle and puts a bunch of engine braking in and that makes it worse. You know, being out in the twisties or something, I'll often put it up into sport mode just to have that razor's edge throttle response. But 90% of the time or more, I'm in street mode, just because the throttle response, you know, the action of the throttle is just much more controllable. Now, if you just rode in sport mode all the time, you'd probably get used to it, you'd probably get a feel for it. But with all the bumps I deal with all day long, it's just not worth it to me to be in that mode all the time. It's just when I get out in the twisties, I'll put it up into sport mode and, you know, get the later intervention from the traction control and whatnot. Now, the electrically adjustable preload has been awesome since I've been riding. You know, I ride solo quite a bit for my commute or club rides, but I've been riding 2-up quite a bit as well, so I can just select on the screen, you know, single rider or passenger and luggage, and it just turns the screws and I can feel the bike lifting underneath me, which is kind of cool. So that, you know, that part of the electronic suspension I like. I'm just shocked at how good the bike handles. And you've probably seen a lot of people when they first ride an adventure bike, they expect it to be big and slow and heavy, and it's not. They turn in fast, they're very nimble. Their weight's really not carried as high up as everybody seems to think. You know, they are tall bikes for sure, and you do feel that when you turn, but they don't feel top heavy. They're nice and planted on the road, and then the suspension travel, it just soaks up the bumps. I think he's got, what, like 7 inches of travel in the rear? That's huge. So I don't get jostled over bumps nearly like I used to on my Harley. But the handling is just absolutely excellent. You can lean it over for miles. It leans in quickly. When you put it on a line, it just holds it. If you need to change it, you can. You know, the bike looks like it should be really top heavy because it's kind of tall, but the engine is mounted really low in the frame, and it's a V-twin, so it's centralized. And the fuel, you know, while it fills right here at the top, it's actually slung down the sides, so a lot of the fuel is very low. And of course, the last of the fuel comes from the bottom, go figure. So the more you ride, the lower the center of gravity is actually getting. So it actually handles quite well. It doesn't handle like a big, tall, heavy bike. It handles like a pretty sporty bike with really good ground clearance. motor, of course, doesn't hurt the situation at all. But very flexible, you know, no problem at all. Light steering, you just throw it over and it holds the line. Stand it back up, just as easy. Hit the apex and start opening the throttle and it just goes. It says, give me more. S's are easy, it just tosses back and forth like nothing. Hopefully I won't have to demonstrate this. The brakes are really, really good. They're very linear, very predictable. They are very, very powerful. Even with the ABS, you can get the rear wheel off the ground pretty easily. It's not something I try to do, but every once in a while in a panic stop, I get a little heavy on the grip there. Good feedback on the brake. Nice of that guy to let me go. You know, no surprises in the braking department. It's got linked brakes, which a lot of people poo-poo. Oh, I know how to use my brakes. Well, you know what? The computer knows better. It's faster. It can apply, you know, absolutely as much rear brake as possible without locking it up. So you get the most braking force you possibly can using the ABS system. So it's definitely a plus. Of course, the bike's got the lean angle ABS. So if you go into a corner ham-fisted, you can slow down and, in theory, not eat shit. Again, not something I really want to test. Tons of cornering clearance. Usually the first thing that touches down is the center stand. Solo, you know, my toe might graze the ground or something like that, but two up's the only time I've hit the center stand or the pegs. Maybe that just means I'm not pushing hard enough, but I'm pushing as hard as I care to on the street. The traction control, it nannies the wheelies a bit, which is fine with me. But around turns and whatnot, it'll step in and suggest that maybe you might be getting a little too aggressive. It's never intrusive. I've never been riding and said, shit, the ABS or the traction control's taking away all my fun. You know, that hasn't happened. It's there as a rider aid, not as a, you know, not as a fun spoiler. The tranny shifts so well. The slipper clutch is amazing. You can be ham-fisted on your downshifts and still not upset the bike. So, been really, really happy with the whole drivetrain on the bike. I tell you, it's stupid fast. The bike just gets up and goes. It's geared a little shorter than I'm used to coming off my V-Rod. Generally I'm one gear higher than I used to be, but it's got one more gear in the tranny than my old bike did too, so it's, you know, it's not a problem, it's just something that I'm adjusting to. Just got instant power. Anything over about 3,500 RPM and it's just ready to go. And off the line, it's not a dog either. It just really builds above 3,500 4K. And it revs out to about 9 before the power's fallen off. 8,500, 9,000 or so. That's usually a good place to be shifting. And that's where the shift light comes on anyway. This chassis is so well sorted. I don't know. I just do idiotic things I would never do on my old bike. Things that should upset it. Nothing. You know, I'll up or downshift in the middle of a corner. I'll trail brake later than I should. Just all kinds of ham-fisted nonsense, and it just says, I don't care. I'm going to keep going. The slipper clutch on this bike, ridiculously well sorted, works tremendously well. You know, I still try to rev match a little bit when I downshift, but I usually end up giving too much gas on my downshifts. It's just so easy to drop a gear in this bike. You know, it just takes a smidgen of power to smooth out the downshift. So that's a great feature, that slipper clutch. Comfort on the bike has been great. I've got everything in stock positions, and you know, as it came from the factory. I am considering about a 2-inch riser so that the bike is a little easier for somebody my height to ride standing up. I find that if I stand straight up, the bar is straight down and I have no leverage. So if I could get up a little higher and get my elbows back a little more, I might be able to shove it a little better while standing. For the most part, it's just a very upright seating position. You know, legs down right below me, arms out in front, shoulders back. It's not like a cruiser where you're laying back, and it's not like a sport bike where you're laying forward. It's really very neutral. You know, I've got very little weight on the bars unless I put it there. So it's very, very comfortable. The seat itself is probably, well, it's one of the two worst things about the bike. The other is the heat that comes off the rear cylinder when you're not moving. You know, if you're at stoplights for a long time or something, or stop and go traffic, you can get a lot of heat building up underneath you. It's not like it's going to burn you, but it does get uncomfortable after a little while. But the seat, you know, right now it's fine, but after a few hundred miles, it starts to pack down. You know, just from the weight of me sitting on it. I start getting pressure points. Have to move around a bit. And on a real long day, my tailbone will be a little sore. Probably going to end up replacing this with a Corbin. They make a real nice one. They replaced the 2-piece on this bike with a 1-piece seat. But it's Corbin's proprietary foam, which is, a lot of people think it's really too hard. I think that's what you need in a seat, is a firmer foam so you don't crush it down and end up sitting on the seat pan like I'm doing on this one. A couple of little niggles, the things I really, you know, things that kind of annoy me about it. One of them, which I discovered just recently, the computer's got a range remaining feature. You know, basically it estimates based on your fuel burn how many miles or how many kilometers you can go before you're in reserve or before you're out of gas. And I thought that was a really cool feature, and I was just amazed at how many miles I was getting according to that. Well, I come to discover that readout is always in kilometers, even when you change it to miles. So if it's reading 300 kilometers remaining and you switch to miles, it'll read 300 miles remaining. I know kilometers are not really the thing here in America, but they're smaller than miles. About 60% smaller. So that number is just, it's hugely inaccurate, and I was relying on it, and thankfully I never cut it too close and ran out of gas, but yeah, so I've had that on my favorites page. That'll be coming off. I think I'll put like outdoor temperature or something in this place. Yeah, I was pretty annoyed by that. You know, they couldn't add the software to make that read correctly. You know, not the end of the world. It wouldn't have made me not buy the bike, but it seems like such a simple thing to just code in a conversion factor for that. But apparently they've not done so. A lot of people on these bikes have complained about heat coming up through the seats. Well, particularly the rider's seat. For the 15 models, they've got a bunch of heat shielding under there. I don't know if that's on the 13 or 14 models, but on the 15 model, there's heat shielding under the front seat. It is insufficient, to say the least. You know, if you're out on the freeway and you're moving and you've got good wind flow, you won't even notice it. On cold days, you might even, you know, wish there was a little more heat coming out of there. But if you're in stop and go traffic, or even if you just, you know, stoplight to stoplight, that kind of thing, it will start to radiate a bit. It's never, oh my god, my balls are on fire, but you will get some heat. It'll start getting warm under there. Oh, the other thing I don't like, the speedometer. The speedometer is off by 10%, and it's not correctable, and it's intentional. To meet some idiotic European laws, the speedometer is intentionally set too fast. So if it's indicating 80, I'm only doing like 72, 73. That's really annoying on the freeway. And the part where it's intentional for the European market and they don't correct it for the American market, I think is a huge oversight on their part. Much like that miles thing, especially since it's just software. How hard would it be to write a new firmware for the American bikes and flash them at the dealership or flash them before they ship? But they don't. I've written some nasty grams about that. We'll see if I get a response. Or the kickstand. The kickstand is not ideal. So it's really long, keeps the bike really vertical, which is fine as long as you can lean it over far enough that it's not going anywhere. But you have to be really careful where you park it. I've never had a second thought that this was the right bike for me to pick. I hop on it and it's like the two of us become one. I think where I want to go and it just does it. Sometimes I think the throttle might have a mind of its own. I twist it a little and all of a sudden we're doing 100 sometimes. But I guess that's not such a bad idea. So yeah guys, KTM 1190 Adventure. If you're looking for a bike that's really sporty, but you can still do a 1,000-mile day on, get this one and slap a different seat on it. You won't have any fatigue when you're done. It's just an excellent, excellent choice. So, in a nutshell, the KTM 1190 Adventure, hands down the best bike I've ever owned. Hands down the best bike I've ever ridden. It's a phenomenal all-around bike. You know, I wanted to have a sport bike and I wanted to have a touring bike, but I could only afford one bike. So this one fit the bill, and it does both better than I could have hoped. It's just an exceptional bike. Highly recommended to anyone. If you guys have any questions about the bike or want to ask me anything, I'm pretty responsive, so just leave me a comment below. It's been SJ Squirrel. Have a good ride, guys.